My granddaughter was arrested for drug trafficking at 19, sentenced to 12 years. Everyone said she was guilty. The police, the lawyers, even her public defender told her to take the plea deal. But I knew she was telling the truth. So I did something nobody expected. I went back. Back to the same prison where I'd worked for 3 decades. Back as a volunteer. Back to prove she didn't do it. The first visit, she had a bruise on her face. Couldn't stop shaking. She was terrified. I taught her how to survive, who to avoid, where to sit, how to stay alive in there. But surviving wasn't enough. I needed proof. And the moment I started looking for it, everything changed. A prison guard started watching me. Someone left a note in my mailbox. They wanted me to stop. But stopping wasn't an option for me. My name is Diane, and this is my story. Before we continue, please leave a comment telling us where you're watching from, and subscribe to Never Too Old channel. We're creating a community of people who know that our best chapters can happen at any age. Now back to the story. The phone rang at 2 in the morning. I knew before I picked it up. You don't work in a prison for 30 years without learning what a middle-of-the-night phone call means. Nothing good happens at 2 a.m. Mrs. Fletcher? The voice was young, official. This is Officer Jones with the county police. Your granddaughter Sophie Fletcher has been arrested. I sat up. The room was dark except for the blue numbers on my alarm clock. What's the charge? Drug trafficking, ma'am. She's being held without bail until arraignment. My hand went tight on the phone. I'll be there in 20 minutes. I didn't ask if she was okay. I already knew she wasn't. I raised Sophie from the time she was 6 years old. Her mother, my daughter Claire, died of an overdose that year. Heroin. She'd been depressed since Sophie's father left when Sophie was 3. One bad decision led to another, and then one day I got a different kind of phone call. The kind where they tell you your daughter is gone and there's a little girl who needs you. My ex-husband lived in Arizona by then. Still does. We divorced when Claire was 12. He sent a card when she died. Never met Sophie, not even once. So it was just us, me and this angry little girl, who didn't understand why her mother wasn't coming back. Sophie grew up blaming me for everything. Too strict, she said. Too controlling. She couldn't see that I was trying to keep her from making the same mistakes her mother made. Or maybe she could see it, and that made her angrier. By the time she was 17, we barely spoke except to argue. She stayed out late, hung around with people who made my stomach turn, came home smelling like smoke and worse. I tried talking to her, tried grounding her. Nothing worked. Then 6 months ago, she started seeing Brandon Cole. I knew he was trouble the first time I saw him. 24 years old, too smooth, drove a car that cost more than I made in a year. He showed up at our house with flowers and that smile that made my skin crawl. Sophie was 19 by then, thought she was in love. He's not good for you, I told her. You don't know him, she said. I know his type. She looked at me like I was the enemy. You don't want me to be happy. You never have. That was the last real conversation we had before the arrest. At the police station, they made me wait in a gray room with fluorescent lights and plastic chairs. An officer brought Sophie out in handcuffs. Her face was red from crying, hair tangled, mascara smeared down her cheeks. Grandma. Her voice cracked. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. Don't say anything, I told her. Not until you have a lawyer. But she kept talking anyway, words spilling out like she couldn't stop them. Brandon asked me to take my car to his friend's place, said he needed to put something in my trunk. Just a package, he said, for work. I didn't ask what was in it. I should have asked. I should have. The officer pulled her away before I could respond. A detective came out 20 minutes later. Tall guy, tired eyes. Your granddaughter was pulled over for a broken taillight. Officers found 2 kilograms of cocaine in the trunk. That's trafficking quantity. Where's Brandon Cole? He flipped through his notepad. The boyfriend? We don't have a current address for him. Phone's disconnected. Seems he doesn't want to be found. Of course he didn't. They assigned Sophie a public defender named Nancy Winters. I met her at the arraignment 3 days later. She was younger than I expected, carrying a briefcase that looked too heavy for her thin arms. Your granddaughter should take the plea deal, she said. We were standing in the courthouse hallway. Sophie was still inside with the judge. If she goes to trial and loses, she's looking at 15 to 20 years. The DA is offering 12 if she pleads guilty. She says she didn't know about the drugs. Nancy looked at me like I was simple. Mrs. Fletcher, the drugs were in the car she was driving. That's possession with intent to distribute. Her story about the boyfriend is exactly what every defendant says, because sometimes it's true. She shifted her briefcase to the other hand. I've been doing this for 5 years. I've never seen a case where the boyfriend story held up, not once. I wanted to tell her about the women I'd seen during all those years working in the prison library. Young women with stories just like Sophie's. Boyfriends who disappeared. Drugs they didn't know they were carrying. I could spot the ones who were telling the truth. You develop an instinct for it. But Nancy Winters had already decided Sophie was guilty. Sophie took the plea deal. 12 years in state prison. The judge accepted it on a Tuesday afternoon in October. Sophie looked back at me from the defendant's table, and I saw the little girl who used to crawl into my bed after nightmares about her mother. I went home to an empty house and sat at the kitchen table until it got dark. That's when I made the decision. Before Sophie's mother was born, I was in law school. Second year. Got pregnant with Claire and dropped out to raise her alone because her father wasn't interested in being a parent. I took the first job I could find that had benefits and flexible hours. The prison library position opened up when Claire was 2. I never went back to finish my degree. Never became the lawyer I'd planned to be. Spent decades pushing a book cart through cell blocks instead. But I still had my textbooks, still remembered the criminal procedure classes, the evidence rules, the appeal processes. I'd watched hundreds of cases move through the system from the inside, seen which ones worked and which ones fell apart. I'd retired 2 years earlier at 65. Spent my mornings with coffee and crossword puzzles, afternoons tending my garden. Quiet life, safe life. Not anymore. If Sophie was going to survive 12 years, she needed someone who knew how that place worked. And if there was any chance of proving she'd been set up, I needed to be close enough to find it. I called the prison administration office the next morning, told them I wanted to come back as a volunteer. We'd love to have you back, Diane, the coordinator said. She remembered me. Most of them did. When can you start? As soon as you'll let me. They approved me within 2 weeks, always short on volunteers, and my years there carried weight. Sophie was transferred to the women's facility an hour north, same prison where I'd spent most of my career. I knew the layout, knew the guards, knew which administrators would look the other way and which ones followed every rule. My first volunteer shift was scheduled for the following Tuesday. I'd see Sophie that weekend during visiting hours. I packed my old legal textbooks into boxes that night. Sat on the floor of my bedroom surrounded by books I hadn't opened in 40 years. Criminal law and procedure, evidence, constitutional law. The pages were yellow, the bindings cracked, but the information was still good. Sophie didn't believe she'd been set up. She thought she'd been stupid, that this was her fault. But I'd seen this pattern before, and I was going to prove it. I didn't know how long it would take. Months, maybe years, but I had time now. Nothing but time. The textbooks went back on my shelf. I set my alarm for 5 a.m. Time to go back to work. The visiting room smelled like disinfectant and bad coffee. I'd forgotten that smell. Or maybe I'd just gotten used to it back when I worked here. They brought Sophie in wearing orange scrubs 3 sizes too big. She'd lost weight. Her hair was pulled back in a tight bun, no makeup, and there was a purple bruise spreading across her left cheekbone. I stood up. What happened to your face? Nothing. She sat down across from me, wouldn't meet my eyes. I'm fine. Sophie, I said. I'm fine. Her voice cracked on the last word. We sat there in silence. Around us, other inmates talked to their visitors. A woman 2 tables over was crying. A guard stood by the door, arms crossed, watching everyone. Sophie's hands were shaking on the table. Look at me, I said. She did. Her eyes were red, exhausted. This wasn't the angry girl who used to slam doors and tell me I didn't understand her life. This was someone who'd spent 2 weeks learning exactly how small she could make herself. You're terrified, I said. That's normal. I don't belong here. I know. Nobody believes me. I do. Her face crumpled. She put her head in her hands and started crying. Not quiet crying either. Big gasping sobs that made the guard glance over. I reached across the table and put my hand on her arm. The guard didn't stop me. "Listen to me," I said. "You're going to survive this, but you need to do exactly what I tell you. Do you understand?" She nodded, still crying. "First rule, keep your head down. Don't make friends too fast and don't make enemies at all. Someone already hates me. I don't even know why." "Did she hit you?" she said. I looked at her wrong in the lunch line. I didn't even see her. "What did you do?" "Nothing," I apologized. But she pushed me anyway, and I fell into the table. "Good. She didn't fight back. You did the right thing. Don't ever fight unless you have no other choice. You hear me?" "Yes." Second rule. Find a place in the library. It's quieter there. Stay out of the common areas when you can. The library. I'll talk to the staff. They'll let you volunteer, reshelf books, whatever they need. It'll give you somewhere to go. She wiped her face with the back of her hand. "Okay." We spent the next hour going over everything: where to sit in the cafeteria, which guards to trust and which ones to avoid, how to respond when someone tried to start something, when to talk and when to stay quiet. Sophie listened to every word. For the first time in 5 years, she actually listened to me. I came back the next week, and the week after that. Every Saturday morning at 9, I sat in that visiting room and taught Sophie how to survive. By the 3rd visit, the bruise on her face had faded. By the 5th visit, she told me she'd started working in the library. By the 10th visit, she looked less like she was about to break. My volunteer shift started in February, Tuesday and Thursday afternoons, 3 to 7. I pushed a cart of books through the cell blocks, same as I'd done for decades before I retired. The place hadn't changed much. Same gray walls, same fluorescent lights, same sound of doors clanging shut. Some of the guards were new. Most of the inmates were different, but the rhythm of the place was exactly the same. I saw Sophie during my shifts sometimes. She'd be at the library desk, checking books in and out, or reshelving in the back. We'd nod at each other but didn't talk. The other inmates would notice if we did. The library became my base. I had access to the legal resources, the old case files that nobody ever looked at, and the space to talk to inmates without anyone paying attention. That's where I met Crystal. She was in her early 20s, long brown hair in a braid, sitting at one of the library tables with a stack of romance novels. I'd seen her around before, quiet type, kept to herself. I was reshelving nearby when she spoke up. "You used to work here, right? Before?" I turned. "That's right. I remember you. You helped me find a book about starting a business. 3 years ago, maybe 4. I did remember her now, younger then, more hopeful looking. "How's that going?" She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Not great, considering where I am." "What are you in for?" "Drug trafficking. Got caught with my boyfriend's stash in my apartment. He told me it was protein powder for his gym business." She shook her head. I believed him. My hand stopped moving on the bookshelf. "Where's the boyfriend now?" "Gone. Moved to another state. Changed his number. Left me holding the bag. Literally." I pulled a book off the cart and slid it onto the shelf. Casual. Like this was just conversation. "What was his name?" "Jason Miller. At least that's what he told me. Found out later he'd lied about that too." My pulse picked up. "What did he look like?" "Tall, brown hair, drove this nice BMW. Always dressed sharp, you know. Had a little star tattoo on his left wrist. Said it was his lucky symbol." She looked down at her hands. "Some luck." I kept my face neutral. "How long have you been here?" 4 years. Got another 2 to go." "They didn't investigate the boyfriend?" "Public defender said there was no evidence he existed. My word against nothing. So I took the plea deal because I was too scared to go to trial." I finished shelving the books on my cart. "I'm sorry that happened to you." "Yeah, me too." I went home that night and pulled out a notebook. Wrote down everything Crystal had told me. The fake name, the BMW, the tattoo, the way he'd disappeared. Brandon Cole, Jason Miller, different names, same man, same method. It took me 3 more weeks to get Crystal alone again. This time I asked more questions. How they'd met, where he'd taken her, what he'd said to get her to trust him. Every answer matched Sophie's story. I started paying attention to other inmates during my shifts, listened to their conversations, asked careful questions when I could. By summer, I'd found 2 more women with similar stories: boyfriends who'd disappeared, drugs they didn't know they were carrying, public defenders who didn't believe them. I documented everything in my notebook at home: names, dates, descriptions. The pattern was there. I just needed more pieces. Sophie was different by fall. Stronger. She'd figured out how to move through that place without drawing attention. Ate her meals quickly, kept her eyes down, spent her free time in the library reading everything she could get her hands on. By the end of that first year, I told her what I'd found. We were in the visiting room. Sophie was drinking vending machine coffee that probably tasted like motor oil. "I don't think you're the only one," I said. She set down her cup. "What do you mean?" "Brandon, or whatever his real name is. I think he's done this before." "To other women?" "At least 3 that I've found so far. Same pattern. Different names, but the same man." Her face went pale. "Are they here? In this prison?" "One of them is. The others were in different facilities." "Oh my God." She leaned back in her chair. "So he's just out there, doing this to other people." "Looks like it. Can we prove it? Can we use this to get my case reopened?" "I don't know yet. I need more evidence, more women, something concrete that ties him to all of you." She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "What do you need me to do?" "Keep your head down, stay safe. Let me handle this part." "Grandma." She reached across the table. "Thank you for believing me, for coming back here." I squeezed her hand. "You're my granddaughter. Where else would I be?" That night, I lay awake in bed staring at the ceiling. I'd found 3 women. There had to be more. How many more? 5, 10, 20? And how was I going to prove it? The notebook sat on my nightstand. I'd filled 20 pages already. Dates, names, details. It wasn't enough. Not yet. But it was a start. By the time Sophie had been inside for 18 months, I'd found 5 more women. Same story, different faces. Young, vulnerable. Boyfriends who'd asked them to hold a package, drive a car, let them store something at their apartment. Then the boyfriends vanished, and the women went to prison. 2 of them were at our facility. 3 more were scattered across the state. I'd reached out to librarians and volunteers I knew from my time working here, asked careful questions, listened to the patterns. The details lined up too perfectly to be coincidence. I kept a notebook at home, hidden in my closet under a stack of old sweaters. Every name, every date, every description of the men who'd disappeared. The notebook was getting thick. 8 women total by the end of that second year. 8 women serving time for men who were still out there. Sophie was different now. Calmer. She'd figured out how to exist in that place without it crushing her. She had a routine: library work in the mornings, reading in the afternoons, phone calls to me twice a week in addition to our Saturday visits. But she was bored. I could see it in the way she drummed her fingers on the visiting room table, the way her eyes wandered during our conversations. "You need something to do with your mind," I told her one Saturday in March. "Something more than reshelving books." "Like what?" I'd brought a book with me, old, worn cover, Introduction to Criminal Law. I slid it across the table. She picked it up, flipped through a few pages. "What's this for?" "I was in law school when your mother was born," I said. "Second year. Had to drop out to raise her alone." Sophie looked up at me. "You never told me that." Never seemed relevant before. I leaned forward. "I gave it up to take care of Claire. Then I took care of you. Never finished what I started." "Grandma, let me teach you what I learned. Maybe you can finish what I started." Her eyes filled with tears. She blinked them back. "You really think I could do that? You're smart, smarter than you ever gave yourself credit for, and you've got time to study. Might as well use it." She opened the book again, more carefully this time, ran her finger down the table of contents. "Okay, yeah, I want to try." I brought her a new book every visit after that. Criminal procedure, evidence, constitutional law, the same textbooks I'd studied decades ago. She read them all. During our visits, I'd quiz her, ask her about the cases she'd read, the principles she'd learned. She absorbed it faster than I'd expected. Started asking questions I had to think hard to answer. By summer, she was reading appellate decisions. By fall, she was helping other inmates understand their cases. That's when she became a jailhouse lawyer. I'd watch her sometimes during my volunteer shifts. She'd sit at one of the library tables with another inmate, both of them bent over a case file, Sophie pointing out something on the page, explaining it in a way that made sense. The other woman would nod, write something down, look at Sophie like she'd just handed her hope. Sophie had found her purpose. Our relationship had changed completely. We weren't grandmother and angry granddaughter anymore. We were partners, allies, two people working toward the same goal. The investigation kept growing. I'd figured out the boyfriend had used at least 5 different names. Brandon Cole, the one Sophie knew, Jason Miller, the one Crystal knew, then Ryan Parker, Chris Davis, and Marcus Webb. Different names, but the descriptions matched. Tall, brown hair, expensive car, smooth talker, and always the same small star tattoo on his left wrist. I made a chart at home, trying to map out the timeline, where he'd been when, how long he'd spent with each woman before setting them up. The pattern was clear once I laid it out visually. He targeted women who were already vulnerable, young, usually poor, often with troubled backgrounds. He'd date them for a few months, gain their trust, then ask for a favor. Just one small favor. And that favor landed them in prison while he walked away clean. The phone numbers were different each time, but I noticed something. The area codes clustered in specific regions. He was moving through the state systematically. I called contacts at other facilities, asked about young women serving time for drug trafficking, described the boyfriend. More names came back, more stories. By the time Sophie entered her 3rd year inside, we'd identified 12 women. 12 lives destroyed by the same man. I needed a lawyer, someone who could look at what I'd found and tell me if it was enough, if there was any legal path to getting these convictions overturned. I remembered one of the other women's cases had been handled by an attorney named Peter Walsh. He worked for a small firm downtown. I'd seen his name on some of the case documents I'd pulled from the prison's legal library. I called his office on a Tuesday afternoon. "I have information about a pattern of wrongful convictions," I told his secretary. "Drug trafficking cases, multiple women, same perpetrator." She put me through. Peter Walsh sounded tired on the phone. "Ma'am, I appreciate your concern, but wrongful conviction cases are extremely difficult to prove. The legal standard is very high." "I have documentation," I said. 12 women across 5 years. Same methods, same type of setup, same physical description of the man who set them up. Silence on the other end. Then, "How detailed is this documentation?" "Very." "Can you bring it to my office?" I went the next day, brought my notebook, and every piece of paper I'd collected, spread it all out on his conference room table. Peter Walsh was younger than I'd expected, maybe 40, with wire-rimmed glasses and a coffee stain on his tie. He looked at my chart first, then started reading through the individual cases. He didn't say anything for 20 minutes. Finally, he set down the last page and looked at me. "This is incredible. Where did you get all this?" "I volunteer at the women's prison. I've been asking questions for 2 years. And you're doing this because my granddaughter is one of the 12. He nodded slowly. "I see. Can you help us?" He tapped his fingers on the table, staring at the chart. "If you can prove this pattern, and if you can identify the perpetrator, there might be grounds for post-conviction relief. The problem is finding him. These names are probably all fake. Do you have any physical evidence linking him to the crimes?" "No. Just the women's testimony and the pattern." "That's going to be difficult. Courts don't like to overturn convictions based on pattern evidence alone. We'd need something concrete. Phone records, financial records, something that proves this man exists and connects him to all these cases." My chest went tight. "So you're saying it's not enough?" "I'm saying it's a start, a very good start, but we need more." He looked at me over his glasses. "How committed are you to finding it, however long it takes?" "Then keep digging. Find out his real name. Find out where he is now. Get me something I can take to a judge." He said he'd review the case files more carefully, see if there were any legal angles we could pursue. Said to call him if I found anything new. I drove home feeling like I'd been punched. 2 years of work, and it still wasn't enough. That Saturday, I told Sophie what the lawyer had said. She took it better than I expected. "So we keep going." "Yes, I'd race. We'll find him eventually. Someone has to know who he really is." I hope so. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Grandma, thank you. For all of this, for not giving up. I'm your grandmother. I don't know how to give up on you. She smiled, but her eyes were serious. I see you differently now. I understand what you sacrificed. For my mom, for me. I'm sorry I didn't see it before. My throat went tight. You were young. You were hurting. I was selfish. You were my granddaughter. That's all that mattered. We sat there holding hands across the table until the guard called time. I went home and added Peter Walsh's contact information to my notebook. Drew a line under the 12 names I'd found. There had to be more. And somewhere, this man had made a mistake, left a trail, used his real name just once. I just had to find it. Peter Walsh called me on a Wednesday morning in February. Mrs. Fletcher, I've reviewed the case files thoroughly. I've discussed this with my partners. He paused. I'm sorry, but we can't take this on. I was standing in my kitchen. I sat down. Why not? It's too complicated. My partners think it's too risky. And honestly, the DA's office got wind that someone was looking into these cases. They made it clear they'd fight us on every motion. My firm doesn't have the resources for that kind of battle. But you said if I found enough evidence. You've done incredible work, really. But without concrete proof linking this man to the crimes, without even knowing his real identity, it's just not viable. I'm sorry. He hung up. I sat at the kitchen table for an hour, staring at nothing. That Saturday, I told Sophie. Her face went blank, the way it used to look when she was a little girl, and something hurt too much to process. So that's it? We just give up? I didn't say that. But without a lawyer, we keep going. We find more evidence. We find him. She looked down at her hands. Grandma, I've been in here 4 years. Maybe this is just how it is. Maybe I need to accept it. No, I have 8 more years left. 8 more years of this place. Maybe I should just. Don't finish that sentence. But she did anyway. Her voice got quiet. Maybe I was stupid enough that I deserved to be here. My chest went tight and hot. You think I spent all this time teaching you law so you could give up? You think I gave it up to raise your mother so you could waste what I taught you? She looked up, surprised. I never became a lawyer, I said. I wanted to help people. Innocent people. That was the whole plan. But I had your mother and that plan changed. Then I had you, and I thought maybe that dream was just gone. I leaned forward. But it's not gone. You're going to finish what I started. You're going to become the lawyer I never got to be. And together we're going to prove what happened to you and every other girl he destroyed. Sophie's eyes filled with tears. They spilled over, ran down her face. I'm sorry, Grandma, for everything, for not listening to you, for being so angry all the time, for not seeing what you gave up for me and Mom. I know. I wasted so much time hating you. You were a kid. You were hurting. I'm still sorry. I reached across the table and took her hand. We're not giving up. You hear me? Not ever. She nodded, wiping her face with her other hand. Okay. What do we do next? We keep documenting. We keep looking. Something will break. It has to. But things got harder after that. Officer Garrett started watching me during my volunteer shifts. I'd known him back when I worked at the prison. Never liked him. He had mean eyes and a way of talking to inmates that made my skin crawl. He'd never paid attention to me before, when I was just pushing a book cart and staying quiet. But now I was asking questions, different questions, and he'd noticed. He'd appear in the library while I was working, stand by the door with his arms crossed, watch me, say nothing. Then one day he stopped me in the hallway. Mrs. Fletcher, need to talk to you about your volunteer clearance. What about it? There've been some concerns about you spending too much time with certain inmates, asking questions about their cases. My pulse picked up. I'm helping them find legal resources. That's part of my volunteer work. Right. Well, we're going to need to restrict your access a bit. You'll be limited to the main library area. No more visits to the cell blocks. On whose authority? Mine. He smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. Just following protocol, ma'am. After that, I couldn't move freely through the prison anymore. Couldn't talk to inmates outside the library. Couldn't build connections the way I had before. Garrett was blocking me. He had to be connected to the drug operation somehow. Had to be. Maybe he was getting paid to look the other way. Maybe he was involved more directly. Either way, my questions had made someone nervous. 2 weeks later, I found my mailbox hanging open. The little door bent like someone had pried it with a crowbar. Inside was a note on plain white paper. Block letters written in black marker. Stop asking questions. I stood on my porch holding that note. Brandon, or Garrett, or whoever was behind this knew where I lived, knew what I was doing, and wanted me to stop. I thought about calling the police, but what would I tell them? That someone who might be connected to a drug dealer I couldn't identify had left me a note? They'd think I was paranoid, or worse, they'd tell me to stop my investigation for my own safety. I went inside and locked every door and window, sat on my couch with the lights off, watching the street through the curtains. I was 71 years old, living alone in a house at the end of a quiet street. For the first time in all of this, I felt real fear. Nothing happened that night, or the next night, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. I thought about stopping, really thought about it. I was tired, old, scared. But then I thought about Sophie sitting in that prison for 8 more years, thought about the other women, thought about how many more he might be setting up right now, while I sat here afraid. Garrett must have told him. That was the only explanation. How else would Brandon know what I was doing? The questions I was asking were all inside the prison. Someone on the inside had to be feeding information out. I went back to the prison the next Tuesday. Garrett was waiting in the parking lot, leaning against his patrol car, watching me walk in. I kept my head up and walked past him. Inside, I found a younger volunteer named Amy. She'd started a few months earlier, bright-eyed and eager, still had full access to the cell blocks. Sweet girl, maybe 25, studying social work at the university. Amy, can I ask you a favor? Sure, Mrs. Fletcher. I need you to talk to some inmates for me. Ask them about their cases, specifically about drug trafficking convictions where the boyfriend disappeared. She looked confused. Why? I'm doing research for a legal advocacy project. Would you help? She agreed. Over the next several months, she asked the questions I couldn't ask anymore, came back with names, stories, details. She was careful, didn't draw attention the way I had. By the end of that 4th year, Amy had helped me find 3 more women with the same story. That made 15 total. Sophie was different now too, harder. She'd been inside for 4 years. That does something to a person. She still studied law, still helped other inmates, but there was an edge to her that hadn't been there before. During one visit, she told me about a fight she'd had to break up. 2 women going at each other in the library. Sophie had stepped between them and taken an elbow to the ribs. You should have called the guards, I said. Wasn't time. Besides, I handled it. She had. But it scared me. The way she said it so casually, like violence was just part of her day now. This place was changing her, the same way it changed everyone who stayed too long. I needed to get her out, before prison became the only life she remembered. That winter, I sat at my kitchen table with my notebook spread in front of me. 15 names, 5 fake identities for the same man, phone numbers that led nowhere, descriptions that all matched but couldn't be verified. 4 years of work, and I still didn't have enough. The note from my mailbox sat on the table next to me, a reminder that I was getting close to something. He'd made a mistake somewhere. They always did. I just had to find it. I turned to a fresh page in the notebook and started making a new list, everything I knew, everything I still needed to find. Somewhere out there, this man had used his real name, left a real trail, connected himself to one of these women in a way that could be proven, and I was going to find it. You're absolutely right on both points. Let me revise. Sophie had been inside for nearly 5 years when a young lawyer showed up. He was waiting outside the prison library, looked too young to be an attorney. He stood up when he saw me. Mrs. Fletcher, I'm Jordan Kim, Public Defender's Office. I stopped. I'm not looking for another lawyer. I know, but I'd like to talk to you anyway. One of the inmates mentioned your name, said you've been helping women with wrongful conviction cases. Who told you that? Crystal Martinez. I'm handling her appeal. She said you've been investigating a pattern. Multiple women, same setup, same perpetrator. I looked at him more carefully. He was young, maybe late 20s, with dark hair and wire-rimmed glasses, wore a suit that looked like it came from a department store clearance rack, carrying a beaten-up leather briefcase. "What's your interest in this?" "I've been following wrongful convictions since law school. This case sounds exactly like the kind of pattern that gets overlooked because nobody connects the dots." He shifted his briefcase. "Can we talk?" "Just 15 minutes. I glanced at my watch. "I have a shift starting in 10. "Then let's make it 10. We sat on a bench outside the prison entrance. I told him what I'd found. 15 women across 5 facilities, 5 fake names for the same man, same physical description, same methods, same tattoo. Jordan pulled out a notebook and started writing. "How detailed is your documentation?" "Very." "Can I see it?" I brought my notebook to his office 3 days later, spread everything out on his desk. 5 years of names, dates, descriptions, timelines, the chart I'd made connecting all the cases. He didn't say anything for 20 minutes, just read through it all, taking notes, occasionally asking a question. Finally he looked up. "This is better than most professional investigations. You've built a real case here." The last lawyer said it wasn't enough. The last lawyer was wrong. He tapped the chart. "This is a clear pattern. If we can identify the perpetrator and prove he contacted these women, we have grounds for post-conviction relief. The problem is we need his real identity and some concrete evidence." "I know. But you've done the hard part. You've found the pattern. Now we just need to find him. Your office will support this?" "I'll make sure they do. This is exactly the kind of case the public defender's office should be taking. Pattern-based wrongful convictions. Multiple victims." He started gathering the papers. "Let me file the paperwork. I'll take this pro bono. We'll start with Sophie's case and build from there." Something loosened in my chest. "Thank you. Thank me when we get her out." Jordan moved fast. Within 2 weeks he'd interviewed 8 of the women, filed motions to access case files, started the process of subpoenaing phone records. By April, we'd found 2 more victims. That made 17 total, spanning 7 years. All with stories that matched too perfectly to be coincidence. Then, in May, we got lucky. Jordan called me on a Tuesday morning. "Turn on the news. Channel 7. I grabbed the remote. The local news was showing a mugshot. A man with brown hair, wearing an orange jumpsuit. The caption read, "Marcus Webb, arrested for domestic violence." "That's him," Jordan said on the phone. "His girlfriend called the police. When they arrested him, they ran his fingerprints." I stared at the screen. This was Brandon. This was the man who'd set up Sophie and all the others. "His real name is Marcus Webb," Jordan continued. "And here's the good part. His fingerprints match evidence from 3 of the cases, DNA from 2 more. The prosecution kept that evidence even after the convictions. So we can link him. We can link him. And once I subpoena his phone records, we can prove he contacted every one of them around the time of their arrests." It took 3 months for the phone records to come through. When they did, the pattern was undeniable. The same phone number had contacted 16 out of 17 women. Text messages, calls, all within days or weeks of their arrests. Then nothing. Jordan filed motions for post-conviction relief for Sophie and 6 others with the strongest cases. Said we'd use those 7 to establish the pattern, then go after the rest. That's when things got complicated. The district attorney's office fought us on every motion, argued that the convictions were sound, that the women had pled guilty, that there was no new evidence to support overturning the cases. But Jordan didn't back down. He presented the phone records, the fingerprint matches, the DNA evidence. He brought in witnesses to testify about Marcus Webb, about how he'd approached them, gained their trust, set them up. Officer Garrett got suspended in August. Turned out the Internal Affairs investigation had been watching him for months. Found evidence he'd been taking payments from someone connected to the drug operation. When they searched his bank records, there were deposits that lined up with dates when women had been asking questions about their cases. The hearings dragged on for 6 months. Every week Jordan would call me with updates. Every week I'd tell Sophie what was happening. She was different now. 24 years old. Been locked up for over 5 years. She'd helped 12 other inmates file appeals while we waited. Spent her time in the law library, reading cases, taking notes. She'd turned into exactly what I'd hoped she would. A fighter. Someone who wouldn't back down. In December, 5 years after Sophie had entered prison, We finally got the hearing that mattered. The judge was an older woman with gray hair and sharp eyes. She'd read every brief, reviewed every piece of evidence, listened to 3 days of testimony from the victims Marcus Webb had destroyed. On the third day, she asked to see my notebook. Jordan brought it to the bench. The judge spent 20 minutes going through it, reading my notes, studying the timeline I'd built. Then she looked up. "Mrs. Fletcher, you're the grandmother?" I stood. "Yes, Your Honor." "You spent 5 years documenting all of this?" "Yes." "While volunteering at the prison where your granddaughter was incarcerated?" "Yes." She looked back down at the notebook. "This is remarkable work." "Thank you, Your Honor." She closed the notebook and handed it back to Jordan. "I'll have my ruling by Friday." Friday came. Jordan called me at 6 in the morning. "We won," he said. "The judge vacated Sophie's conviction, ruled she was a victim of criminal coercion and fraud. 6 others got the same ruling. The rest are being reviewed." I sat down on my kitchen floor and cried. Sophie's release was scheduled for 2 weeks later, January, 5 years and 2 months after she'd been sentenced. I went to see her that Saturday, told her the news in person. She didn't cry, just sat there, staring at me across the visiting room table. "It's real?" she finally said. "It's real. I'm getting out? You're getting out." Then she cried, put her head down on the table and sobbed. I reached across and held her hand while the guards watched and the other inmates pretended not to notice. When she finally looked up, her face was red and wet. "You never gave up. You're my granddaughter. I don't know how." 5 years. You spent 5 years fighting for me. And you spent 5 years becoming the woman I always knew you could be. She squeezed my hand. "I'm going to help them. The others. The ones still waiting. I know you will. And Grandma?" She wiped her face. "Thank you. For everything. For believing me when nobody else did." I drove home that afternoon with the winter sun low on the horizon. 5 years. It had taken 5 years. But we'd done it. Sophie was coming home. I got to the prison at dawn, stood outside the gates with my coat buttoned up against the January cold, watching the sky turn from black to gray to pale blue. The gates opened at 7. Sophie walked out wearing jeans and a sweater I'd brought her the week before. She'd left her hair down. 5 years since I'd seen her with her hair down. She stopped when she saw me, just stood there on the other side of the gate, staring. I walked over and hugged her. She was taller than I remembered, stronger, but she held on to me like she was 6 years old again. 5 years, she said into my shoulder. You came every week for 5 years. Where else would I be? She pulled back, looked at me. Her eyes were wet. I don't know how to thank you. You already did. You survived. You learned. You became who you were supposed to be. We drove home with the windows down even though it was freezing. Sophie kept turning her head to look at everything. Trees, houses, cars on the highway, a dog running in someone's front yard. It's so big out here, she said. I forgot how big everything is. At home, she walked through every room, touched the furniture, looked out the windows, stood in the kitchen like she'd never seen it before. Your room is the same, I told her. I didn't change anything. She went upstairs, came back down 20 minutes later with red eyes. That first week was hard. We went to the grocery store and she had a panic attack in the cereal aisle. Too many choices, too many people, too much noise. We left the cart and went home. She couldn't sleep in her room, said it was too quiet, too dark, slept on the couch with the TV on for the first month. Little things startled her. Doors closing, people walking up behind her, loud voices. But she got better. Slowly. I helped her the same way I'd helped her survive prison, one day at a time. Small steps, patience. 3 more women got their convictions vacated by March. Jordan kept working on the rest. Said it would take time, but the pattern was established now. The cases would be reviewed. Marcus Webb went to trial in April. I didn't go. Neither did Sophie. We watched the verdict on the news instead. Guilty on multiple counts. Drug trafficking, conspiracy, fraud, 20 years in prison. Longer than any of the women he'd set up had served. Sophie turned off the TV when it was over. Didn't say anything. Just sat there. You okay? I asked. Yeah, I just thought I'd feel different, like closure or something. But I just feel tired. That's normal. Is it? You spent 5 years fighting. Now you don't have to fight anymore. That's exhausting in a different way. She nodded. What do I do now? You live. You figure out what you want. You take your time. Sophie enrolled in community college that fall. Started with basic classes. English, math, history. Said she needed to remember how to be a student before she could think about law school. She was 25 by then. Lived at home with me. Worked part-time at a legal aid office. Studied at night. Some days were good. Some days she'd come home and go straight to her room and I wouldn't see her until morning. But she kept going. By the time she was 26, she'd transferred to the university, started taking pre-law classes. Her grades were perfect. She studied the way she'd studied in prison, like her life depended on it. She applied to law school the following year. Got accepted to 3 schools, chose the one closest to home. You don't have to stay nearby, I told her. You can go wherever you want. I want to stay here, with you. The 3 years she spent in law school were the best years we'd had since she was a little girl. She'd come home on weekends, tell me about her classes, ask my opinion on cases she was studying. Sometimes we'd sit at the kitchen table with law books spread between us, and it felt like we were both finally doing what we were meant to do. She volunteered at the legal aid office through all 3 years, helped 5 people get their wrongful convictions overturned, used everything I'd taught her, everything she'd learned in prison, everything Jordan had shown her about building a case. We went to every one of their release hearings together. Watched them walk out of court as free people. Sophie would cry every time. I'd hold her hand and we'd sit there while the courtroom emptied around us. Graduation day came on a Saturday in May. I sat in the audience wearing the dress I'd bought special for the occasion, watching hundreds of students in black robes file into their seats. Sophie was near the back. I could barely see her from where I sat, but I knew she was there. The dean started reading names. One by one, students walked across the stage, accepted their diplomas, moved their tassels from right to left. Then I heard it. You're Sophie Fletcher, Juris Doctor. My eyes filled up. I watched her walk across that stage, shake the dean's hand, hold up her diploma. She looked out into the audience, found me, smiled. I smiled back through tears. After the ceremony, I waited outside while families took pictures and students hugged each other. Sophie came through the crowd, carrying her cap and gown, diploma in her hand. She walked straight to me, held out the diploma. This is yours as much as mine, she said. You started this dream, I just finished it for both of us. I took the diploma, looked down at her name printed in formal script. Sophie Fletcher, Juris Doctor. I'm so proud of you, I said. I wouldn't be here without you. You know that, right? You did the work. You taught me how. She hugged me again. Thank you, Grandma, for everything, for never giving up, for believing in me when I didn't believe in myself, for spending 5 years proving I was worth saving. You were always worth saving. We stood there in the May sunshine, surrounded by celebrating families, holding that diploma between us, the one I'd started working toward 48 years ago when I was her age, the one she'd finished for both of us. Sophie's friends called her over for pictures. She went, laughing, still in her graduation robes. I watched her, 27 years old, a lawyer, strong, smart, capable, ready to help other people the way we'd helped her, ready to fight for people who had no one else to fight for them. She'd spent 5 years in prison, but she'd come out better than she went in. Not broken, not bitter, just determined, and I'd spent 5 years fighting to free her. 5 years that had given me back the purpose I'd lost when I dropped out of law school all those years ago. We'd saved each other. I looked down at the diploma in my hands one more time, then I folded it carefully and put it in my purse. Sophie glanced back at me, still smiling. I nodded at her. She nodded back. We'd finished what we started, both of us. So, that's my story. I'd love to hear what you think. Would you have believed Sophie was innocent from the start, or would you have doubted her? Let me know in the comments, and subscribe for more stories like mine.